It would seem as if our benefactor has left us. If only this business were run by an elf, everything would run much better. Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Oh, elf, you're here. What's up, man? I had to get my tires rotated. There's all this other stuff's going on. I'm sorry, but finally we are getting to the video about. And that's all you have to say. I'm sorry. Well, I'm sure sorry does not cut it. Hey, dude, I'm sorry, but... Wait. What? I have one of my own creations giving me lip. You're not even Squeak! You're not even Squeak, bruh! People come to this channel for Squeak. You're just a random elf that nobody likes. You know what? No. I'm done. It's over. I'm out. You deal with it. Well, welcome to the Timian Show, where we'll... Why did you turn off the lights? Okay now, stand back, I'm a brilliant, valiant elf warrior, stay away! Well, it would seem as though you've been left to introduce us. I am a count who will introduce the greatest vampire to ever live, Vlad von Carstein. It was so nice of JB Illusion to leave me a snack. Oh no, wait, no! The tale of Vlad von Carstein is one tied to the very origins of the vampires themselves, for his story begins not in the land of Sylvania, but Kemri, before its leaders became members of the undead. He was a member of the Nagash military, a masterful tactician and blood relative of the world's first necromancer. He followed his ruler, General Setep, and assisted in the conquering of lands so far south of their native home that the scholars of the Empire are still digging up ancient relics of their brutal campaigns. Vashinish, as he was known, followed his leader without question, until he saw an opportunity to increase his status. By betraying his general, he saved the country of Lamia from certain ruin. For this act, the queen of this land, Neferata, offered him the last of the elixir of life, the same potion that Nagash had given her, to create the old world's first vampire. Together they ruled the country of Lamia and its ever-growing population of vampires. Their new servants were seated throughout Nagash, where they manipulated things from the shadow, stopping all attempts to unify the country under any rule that was not theirs. After centuries of uncontested rule, King Alcadazar, the Conqueror, with the combined strength of the other territories, laid siege to Lamia. As the army breached the city walls, they were horrified by what lay in wait. The city guard, bolstered by a vast horde of the undead. Though outnumbered, the protectors of Lamia could be constantly replenished, the dead rising as soon as they fell. Their living soldiers proved far less reliable. They allowed the enemy forces to bypass them and head straight to the temple where the ruling vampires hid. Their temple in flames, the remaining vampires retreated into the desert. Some scattered to the area known as the Badlands, but the others found themselves called towards their creator. They found Nagash in the process of creating an army to take full control of Nagash. Nagash himself had played a part in their downfall. Neferata was furious that he would use her to gather the generals that would lead his horde of the undead. Even more so when he chose his distant relative, Vashinish, to lead his forces. Nagash had crafted a ring that would allow the vampire who wore it to return from the dead even more easily than they already could. But through that ring, Nagash would control all of vampire kind. Vashinish accepted the ring, and at Nagash's command, the vampires led his army to Kemri. At first, the vampires worked with fervor, until they realized that their new master cared not for them, but just their power. He recklessly threw them into battle, to die and hopefully reform, so they could do it all over again. All of the vampires soon tired of this situation, none more than the chosen general Vashinus himself. They couldn't overcome the power of the ring that binded them, but a cunning plan was concocted. At the height of the battle with Alcadazar, the vampire general allowed himself to be slain, without a living vampire to form as a conduit for the ring's power. The other vampires were freed and quickly fled from their master. Vashinus eventually returned due to the power of the ring. Nagash slain, and Khemri in ruins, he spent the next few centuries experimenting with the ring and testing its limits. During this time, he lived in Kislev, taking the name Vladimir, when Sylvania came under attack from the Skaven, who soon followed the Black Death that had ripped across the lands. He found himself on the battlefield once again. As Prince Vladimir, he rose an army of the undead to exterminate these pests. Content with this, he retreated back to Kislev, where he continued his experiments for the next several centuries, until he would once again venture into the lands of Sylvania, under the name Vlad von Carstein. Otto von Drac, the last of the Mad Counts, was a cruel leader, fond of executing his subjects for the slightest provocation. In his dying days, no noble followed his mad rantings, and his country was fraught with strife. On his deathbed, Otto swore that he would marry his daughter, Isabella, to a demon, if it would keep his hated brother from taking the throne. He had refused his daughter's hand to all of the noblemen in Sylvania, and no noble outside of the country's borders wanted to marry into the bloodline. The storm raging outside was the only noise that permeated the air, as the group of nobles waited for Otto to die. Then the sound of wheels and pounding hooves drew their attention. A coach, pulled by black steeds, drew up to the keep. A voice demanded entry, and he was given it. The castle gates swung open before a single guard had touched them, and the guard dogs on duty ceased howling and slunk into the shadows. The stranger was tall, handsome, and eerie. He marched directly to the count's room and asked for Isabella's hand in marriage after recounting his lineage. Otto almost regretted his words at that moment, but he gave his blessing. There the two were married. As the priest pronounced them man and wife, Otto passed away, leaving his estate and daughter in the hands of Vlad. The man's first act of office was to toss Isabella's uppermost window of the tallest tower of Castle Drakenhof. The new ruler seemed as eccentric as the first. He never ate in front of guests. Strange people began working in the castle, and he never walked outside in broad daylight. But his rule was far better than the Mad Count. No one was executed unjustly. Taxes were light, and whenever his people were threatened, Vlad would ride out and slay their attackers. The only person unconvinced of his right to rule was Isabella. She rebelled against him, and for the first time, Vlad had met his match. He fell instantly in love with her, and soon she too fell in love with him. One day the doctors of their court found Isabella in a horrible state. Her heart had eventually stopped. Vlad dismissed the doctors and took care of his wife. 3 days later, she announced her good health to her subjects, with noticeably paler skin. Eventually, strange things began to happen. People began to disappear, but most paid it no mind until his name was brought up to possibly become emperor. As other nobles allied with Vlad began to pick up his habit, even the dimmest of peasants could see something was wrong. By the time his true nature was realized, it was too late. With the warp stone his vampiric subjects had gathered from Mordheim, he cast a dark spell that raised every single cadaver in Sylvania. The vampire wars had started. The war's climax was at the siege of Altdorf. The city was well prepared for the siege, but through sheer magical might, Vlad darkened the skies and his creatures fought in perpetual night. Seeking divine guidance, Grand Theonist Wilhelm III retreated into the catacombs of Altdorf to try to find some sign from Sigmar. He found a vampire instead. Manfred von Carstein. Manfred wanted Vlad's power, but wasn't strong enough to best his liege. So a plan between the two parties was concocted. First, an elaborate trap was set up to capture the Empire's greatest thief. Then, with aid from Manfred, the thief was able to rob Vlad of his ring. The Count awoke infuriated. Without the power of the ring, his siege would not last, so he threw all he had against Altdorf in a frantic last push. There, on the battlements, he confronted Wilhelm III, and eventually overcame him. The Theonist, with his last breath, threw himself against Vlad. The two careened off the battlements and landed amid wooded spikes set up in defense against the forces of the undead. With his death, the army soon crumbled, and Altdorf was saved. Isabella, not wanting to live without her beloved, staked herself on a spike, crumbling to dust beside him. In the end times, one of Nagash's first acts was to revive Vlad and secure his loyalty by presenting him with his ring and promising to revive Isabella. However, another force had revived her. Nurgle. She became a mutated beast suited to slaying the undead. After battling alongside Lutherhus, Vladimir fought to protect the Everqueen. Here, he was confronted by Isabella. Refusing to kill her, he led her to the top of the battlement, where he charged. As they fell, he removed his ring and placed it on her. The spikes killed her and her love, as the ring purged the daemon from her body. She awoke, revived by the ring, whereas her lover's eyes remained closed. Vladimir sacrificed himself for the woman he loved.